Alrighty, today we are going to go over midpoint and length of a line segment. Okay. So as we can see in our textbook, we're given this formula, or these two formulas, where distance is equal to the square root of the difference of our x coordinates plus the difference of our y coordinates squared. Okay. And then midpoint is equal to you add your x divided by 2, and then you add your y coordinates divided by 2. All right, this is a pretty intimidating formula, so let's break it down into a more visual way. All right, let's say we want to find the midpoint of these 2 points, okay? AKA the midpoint of this line. So what we have to do is we have to find the horizontal midpoint and the vertical midpoint. All right, so let's split this up into horizontal and vertical components. Well, our horizontal component of these 2 lines starts at -4 and goes to 2, right? So we want to figure out what's the halfway point between -4 and 2. And following our formula, we know all we need to do is add these 2 values together. So -4 plus 2, right? These are our x components, divided by 2 is equal to -2 over 2, which is equal to -1. And just like that, we know the midpoint of our horizontal section is at this point, right? Now we need to find the midpoint of our vertical section. Well, we see that it starts at 3 and ends at 1, or vice versa, starts at 1, ends at 3. Right, so the midpoint between 1 and 3, well, you obviously know it's going to be at 2, just off the rip, right? And where those 2 lines meet is going to be -1 and 2. And we can also prove that algebraically by adding our 2 midpoints. 3 plus 1, right? Adding these 2 y components divided by 2 is equal to 4 divided by 2 is equal to 2. So just like that, we know our midpoint is going to be at -1 and 2. All right? So we can confirm this by saying, okay, this goes 3 wide and 1 up, and same thing here, 3 wide, 1 up. Therefore, our lines are split into 2 equal sections, and that is our midpoint. Now, let's look at finding our distance, right? So let's bring this down and look at the same line, and let's say we want to find the distance here. It's a very similar process, but notice for distance, you now have to subtract the components from each other. Okay? Why are we doing that? So the way we find this midpoint is we basically look at this like a triangle. We can't necessarily just measure this, but what we do know is it has a horizontal component and a vertical component again, right? And we know the length of this vertical component, right? We know it's 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, 4 unit, 5 unit, 6 unit, right? That's the length of this. How did we find that out? Well, we just did -4 minus 2, right? And the negative doesn't matter too much in this point. You can either get a negative or a positive. It doesn't matter because we're going to be squaring these values, as you can see here, right? So if you do it the other way around, it's going to be the same thing. 2 minus -4 is equal to 6, right? And we don't care if it's negative or positive. We just want the length of this line. So this line we know is 6 units long. We're going to do the same thing for this y component. So we have 3 and 1. So 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. Or 1 minus 3 is equal to -2. Again, we don't care. For now, let's just keep our positive values just because it makes it a little bit cleaner. So we know we now have a triangle with a base of 6 units and a height of 2 units. We now need to solve, what is this called? Well, it's called the hypotenuse, right? And we know in a right angle triangle, if you add both of these 90-degree lengths together and square them, you get c squared. So let's write that out. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. In this case, a and b are our 2 right angles. So 6 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. Or 36 plus 4 is equal to c squared. Or 40 is equal to c squared. Now all we have to do to get rid of the squared is square root both sides, and now we can cancel out the squared, and we know c is equal to the square root of 40. And the square root of 40, we punch into our calculator, we know is going to be 6.3. So now we can say, okay, the length of this line is 6.3. So midpoint of this line was -1 and 2, and the length of this line is 6.3 units. And that is how we're going to go through and find midpoint and length of a line segment. Okay?